Now, we're talking about the fundamental need that we humans have for supportive instruction about how to be ourselves. And I'm laying the responsibility for the need for therapy very much as a kind of source, the defects that we have received for that kind of instruction that we so much need. Now, at this point, I want to do something, which is to mention some of the specifics whereby this lack of instruction manifests itself. But I want to begin by saying that I believe it's very important to be slow and cautious here, because there's a natural desire, especially if you want to make this effective and scientific, note the key word, to give this a kind of order, to try to give this a kind of understanding. But in my opinion, and I've said this along the way, it's exactly the kind of standardized generalizations that a document like the DSM wants to make, which is at fault and radically falsifies the potential good that therapy can do. Because what it does is it obliterates the individuality of every one of our experiences. In other words, what I'm saying is that if there were 5 men in front of me and all 5 of those men were doing exactly the same thing, with exactly the same kind of gesture and physical posture and look on their face and all the rest of it, I would assume that they are doing 5 different things, and that it would be necessary to talk extensively to each one of those individuals to understand why he as an individual would be doing the particular thing that he's doing, even though it looks like what the other 4 are doing. I had a conversation recently with a friend of mine who said that in his opinion what this was made it impossible to use language, and in the sense that generalizations serve us in language to help us understand what's going on. That's exactly what I'm doing. In other words, if I want to put somebody under the umbrella of a given definition, what I'm doing is erasing the individual experience that he or she has had, and therefore I run the risk of misunderstanding, of not taking in, of not comprehending this individual all over again as a repetition of what happened when he or she was being raised as a child. That's the problem. That's the dilemma that faces us here. So it's a matter of understanding each individual in terms of the experience that that individual has actually had. And what we're saying is that to the degree that I as an individual, I as a child, am not comprehended, am not taken in, am not radically affirmed by my caregivers who are raising me, to that degree there will be a pain, there will be a gap, there will be a lacuna in my experience. And anything I am doing, especially if it ranges into the area that we normally refer to as pathological, must be understood as an attempt to compensate for that. Now, one of my usual examples for this is what happens to human sexuality. Now, it's a major topic. When people think psychoanalysis, it's, of course, Freud and sexual theory. It's understandable that he would have taken that in as an area in which this expresses itself. The question is, what about the generalizations that follow? Now, I think what happens is that men and women are bad, little boys, little girls are equally badly raised. It's not like either one of the sexes is taken in more. But I think that they're misunderstood in different ways. And as a consequence, little boys are raised to, tough it up, don't cry, be effective, get out there and do your work well, and shoulder the burden, don't whine, don't cry, don't feel sorry for yourself, just get the job done. And what that does is, to some degree or other, comes across as a lack of sympathy, as a lack of understanding for the often very rich emotional experience that little boys have. There are some tests which actually say that little boys are more emotional than little girls. I'm not so sure how much I trust those tests, but there are tests that do say that. In which case, to be exiled from your feelings has got to be even more painful for these little boys that are experiencing this. Now, what would happen is, for not all boys, but for many, there's one place that's unmistakably solacing, unmistakably a place of relief, and that's between their legs. Given the way the male anatomy is structured, it's a natural thing. Even newborns are sometimes fondling themselves and aware of the sensation they receive. Now, what that can lead to, you see, is a kind of stress in males, many men's sense of themselves, is this emphasis on sexuality. As one of my clients put it when he was talking about how he started at a very early age, much earlier than prepubescent, to emphasize the pleasure he felt from his own sexuality. He said, after all, something had to feel good, you see, because he was being raised in a family, in a home where there was a considerable degree of pain. As a matter of fact, I encountered him when he was in his late 30s, and his relationship to his family still contained that kind of pain. So it was very easy to understand the kind of rejection, the kind of lack of sympathy, the kind of being dragged over rough cobblestones that being raised in that family felt like. Something had to feel good. And you see, what that leads is to that kind of insensitive, dismissive generalization about, man, I've actually seen it said on television. Did you go out with the guy? Yeah, was he interested in sex? Is he a man? You see? And you can make fun of men, you know, especially if you're given to certain kinds of schools of thought for being so interested in sexuality. It isn't recognized that this could be the quest for some kind of way to feel good in an unsympathetic world. Now, the most extreme version of that is when someone resorts to rape. Now, don't misunderstand me. I am not suggesting ever that a rape is in any way justified, any way understandable. It is not. It is a crime. It is an offense. But the question is, why is some man led to offend by that kind of crime, by that kind of rape? You see, and if we take this idea that this desperate kind of behavior is based on the assumption that whatever I'm looking for, whatever I need is never going to happen, well, then the only way to get this is by a crime, by a violence, by a violation, because I'm never going to be sympathized. I'm never going to feel good. I'm never going to be cradled in the sense that I want to be. Now, this is not something that's uniquely male. In other words, a very analogous kind of thing occurs with girls, and there's much more of a kind of sympathy towards girls. They're more delicate, you know, little pink ribbons, all that kind of nonsense. But they also means that the girls are not seen. They're not taken into account for what they really need, what they really are, what the vitality of the girl is. Now, again, this is a generalization. Just as the sexual variety could take any number of expressions for the male side, this, for the female side, in my opinion, takes the form of the need for care. And then that could be infinitely varied: emotional care, economic care, you know, care for the children, care for the house, all that kind of care. So that when men and women meet each other, generally there's the need for sex meeting the need for care. Now, again, the varieties and the individual variations on that are infinite, but if the two people meeting don't realize that this is what's in play, then the request of the woman for something and the request of the man for something is not going to go easily, because the other is not going to understand, is not going to be able to respond, is looking for something else. And a great deal of the trouble that occurs in couples' relationships, in my view, can rest in this kind of thing. This kind of need for him to receive care as he understands it, need for her to receive the care as she understands it, and you're not hearing me, you say. Now, what I'm saying about that is the divorce rate right now supports my contention. As you know, in North America, better than 50% of marriages break up in divorce. Why? If the thing starts out so positively, if they're two are so excited about each other that they're willing to even go so far as to have a wedding ceremony and seal the knot legally, how come better than 50% of these relationships break up? Something is radically wrong about the assumptions that we make about this thing. And my point is that there's no understanding of what the positive thing that's being sought is. Now, if this couple is troubled and comes to us as therapists, and we don't recognize that each is looking for something and wondering, at any rate, if not worse, angry or whatever about not getting it, we're not in a position to help them get to understand it. You see, to really achieve what it is that is being sought. Now, the most important thing about that, in my view, is that since as children, it is appropriate to assume that the thing needed, the feeling, the experience needed is to be provided by our caretakers, it naturally happens that an adult man, an adult woman will tend to assume that what I'm seeking must come from somebody else. I should get it from that woman. I should get it from that guy. That's why I often say a young couple, when they meet each other, you know, there's a surge of beautiful feeling and wonderful romance and so on. And the guy doesn't realize that every feeling he's feeling is his feeling about her. The woman doesn't realize that every feeling she's feeling is her feeling about him. It's almost no relationship to the actual person over there across at all. It's, what I need, what I'm looking for, what I'm seeking is going to be gotten from that individual over there. Who knows whether or not he or she can really provide it? And thereby hangs the question, you see. The most important thing, in my view, to realize here is that there's an essential prior first step in this, which is to understand what I was looking for as a child and did not get. What is it that I have that I already possess that was not recognized? What part of me as a human being is seeking for a recognition from the other that I assume cannot happen, will not ever be given, because it never was. And therefore, I attempt to extract it as an item of care from my partner, but I never realize that I can never be satisfied. I am insatiable because my need was never met. I am habituated to the fact that it has not been met. I don't even realize I assume it will not be met. I just want it over and over and over. It's impossible for me to get it. After all, given my experience for the first 18 years of my life, it never happened. Why should it happen now? Except I want it. I want it like hell. And the other has to give it to me. If I can't receive it, if I can't know it, if I assume it cannot be given, it doesn't matter how much is really being given to me by the other person. I can't hear it. I'm deaf. I'm emotionally deaf and will not receive it. And that's a fundamental way in which this lack of the respect we need as kids, the respect for what we need as young human beings, will continue to play out as an active ingredient of my relationships in my adulthood. And I'm sure all of us have encountered mature adults who continue to enact the quest for what was not given, to continue to enact a hope to receive what was not filled in my being from the people and others around me, but who continue that quest with the fundamental assumption that it will always be unsuccessful and I will never successfully get what I need. It's a sad situation.